Okay, nice. So I'm Jackson from Modal Electronics, and I'm back today with the third webinar in our webinar series. And today we're looking at ARGON8, and I'm concentrating on the new features that we have just implemented in firmware version 2.0. So this is a firmware update that we released on Wednesday. So if you've not already updated, you can go and do that now. Modal app should prompt you as soon as updates are available. So the likelihood is that you've already done it. So yeah, today we're going to go and have a look through all of the new features. So we're going to look at selectable envelope curves. We're going to look at all the different delay types that we've now implemented. We're going to look at the chord invert, which I was just playing with a little bit there. We're going to look at the new polyphonic step sequencer, which is very, very cool. And then we're going to talk about improvements to the gain structure, the gain boost feature, and the patch gain, and the signal to noise, and all this sort of stuff. And then we're going to look at MPE. So I've got a Rolly C board set up here going into the Argon, and yeah, we'll take a look at some of the patches that we've just released. We just put 100 new patches up with the firmware and the app update on the website. If you go to our website modalelectronics.com and you go to the relevant product page ARGON8, you will find in the download section obviously all the manuals, the change logs, so you can see all the changes and you can figure out how all of these things work independent of me showing you. And you can also get these 100 patches which show off the MPE and the new delay and the envelopes and all that sort of stuff. So go and grab those if you haven't already. And we're going to jump straight in and we're going to look at the envelopes. As ever, I forgot to say, those of you watching the webinar, you're going to have the opportunity to comment throughout this. So if you have any questions about the firmware or anything that I'm doing whilst you're watching, just put them in the comments box. I'll be there to answer any questions, and a couple of the devs from Modal will also be there to answer any of your questions as we go along. And we'll loop back and answer all of those questions at the end as well. So stick around and yeah, you get the chance to ask us some questions. So one of the most popular feature requests that we've had since we released ARGON8 has been for us to extend the length of the envelopes. And I think we base a lot of our development efforts on the kind of requests that we get through the support inbox, or the kind of feature requests that we see on any of the YouTube videos and things like this. So this was one of the first things on the sort of checklist for ARGON8 Firmware 2.0. And we expanded on kind of the initial request of just extending the times to increase the amount of envelope types. So we've got 7 envelope types that we can choose from now. And breaking this down, basically what we have is 3 different envelope curves and long variants of each of those curves. So we've got Expo, which is an exponential curve. This is kind of the classic curve that Argon shipped with initially, suited for kind of all types of sounds. And then we have the snappy envelope, and this is kind of best suited for kind of percussive sounds, or anytime you want a transient or quite fast and kind of ramping attacks and decays and stuff. Then we have the soft envelope. This is much smoother attack and release times and is better suited for pads and that kind of content. And we have the linear envelope. This is just a straight linear lines. This would be good for modulation if you want to use it for that sort of stuff. That would be cool. And then we move on to the long variant. So we have the Expo long, so it's the same exponential envelope, but we have double the amount of time for each stage of the envelope. We have the snappy long, again the same snappy curve but with twice the available time. We have obviously soft long, again the same as expected, and linear long. So we've got these 7 new types. We have 3 new curves to play with in these 2 different variations of them. So we're just going to have a little look. I'm going to show you on the synthesizer where you can find these, and we're going to have a little listen to some of them. So I'm going to go through to the envelopes here, and what I can do is actually on the page here. So if I click on any of these envelopes, I'm going to select that envelope, and then I just use this page param, and I can just go to the end of the the menu there and highlight the type. And the moment we're on Expo, so that's the original, I'm going to move it on to Expo long. So we're just going to get a slightly longer curve. Just get rid of these crazy effects here. So yeah, I've put it on just to show you the difference here. So I've put it on at the moment expo long. So we go back to expo. So expo long, here we go. You can already tell the release is kind of sticking on for a nice little bit longer there. I'm going to increase it a bit, and I'm going to increase the decay, and I'm also going to go over to the amp, and I'm going to do the same to that. So I'm going to go over to this type, and I'm going to put that on the same expo long here, and I'm going to give this bit of release as well. Long. So that kind of wraps it up for the envelope types. I'm not going to dawdle too much on those. We're going to move on, and we're going to talk about the new delay modes. So I had a little jam in the intro and played with some of that. Let's go and grab some effects to play with on here. We're just going to leave it on the same patch, and we will look at the different delay modes, and I'll give you a basic kind of rundown of what they are as well. So I'm just pressing FX1 to cycle through the FX types, and I'm going to go and choose any of the delays. So I've landed on crossover delay, so I'm just going to set that up a bit dry and wet. I'm just going to have it full, short time, some feedback. I got a bit carried away there. Okay, so we have basically put in 3 delay types now. So we have the original delay type that Argon shipped with, which is now referred to as color. So this is the classic delay that Argon had, which kind of saturates and smears the tails a little bit. Then we have clean, which is like this crystal clear, clean delay, none of that smearing to the tails. And then we have a long variation, and this is the same pristine, clean delay, but with 4 times the amount of time available to you. So you have this crazy, long delay that you can get access to. So I've just brought the app up, and you can see down here we have access to this delay mode. So we're currently on color, which is the original. I'm going to swap that over now to clean. And then after this, we have the long mode. So if I just, there you go. So you can really get crazy with that one. So yeah, that wraps it up for the delay modes. Now we're going to look at the chord invert. Now you saw me playing with a little bit of this in the intro. This is probably one of my favorite features. It's quite a subtle feature, but it's one of my favorite features in this update. Because for me, like, I'm really interested in demystifying kind of music theory and chords for people that, you know, haven't had training on that sort of stuff, because it is difficult. And I think any way that you can give people access to kind of more interesting things or tools that make music and playing music and making music easier, you know, that's kind of more interesting for me. So this is one of the things for me that I get really excited about, but probably might fly under some people's radars. So what we have is a live chord inversion tool. What this means is when you start to play notes, your notes are going to start to get reassigned. So an inversion is usually where you take one of the notes and you move it up an octave, and you start by doing this one up and then the next one and then the next one until they're all up an octave, usually leaving your root, and they work in both directions. You can go either way. So we've implemented this function here, and you use it patch and drift. You see there I have chord invert. I'm going to go all the way back down to off, and we're just going to listen to normally. And you'll hear, let's get rid of a bit of this. You will hear when I start to scan through them that some of the notes are going to start to shuffle, and this is those notes being reassigned. So it's like my fingers just jumping up an octave as we scan through, which is really, really cool. So if I just go there. And at the end here, we've got these shuffle modes. Now these are really, really interesting because these work on every other note, kind of moving them in a different part of the key range. So you notice with these ones, the notes relatively stay grouped next to each other. They're all in the same sort of bracket, but now when I go to the shuffles, nice. So yeah, this is a really, really cool tool. It doesn't matter if you're kind of a novice or you're, you know, like a seasoned player. This is going to be a really, really useful tool just in unlocking the keyboard a bit more and making kind of those more exotic voicings accessible to you. And it might be one of those things that you might, you know some triads, or you know some 4-note chords, you don't know all the shapes on the keyboard. This is going to give you a new character to the things that you would usually write, because you can remain playing the same chords that you usually write, but just switch an inversion on and you have a completely new character. So that's going to be a very cool one to see how people react to that. And yeah, don't let it fly under your radar. So we're moving on from the chord inversion to talk about the step sequencer. Now this is a massive, massive, massive topic, really. It's so in depth and it's so capable that we could do this for hours, really. I could spend probably 2 hours just playing with this and talking you through all the different features and how we can set them up. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a couple of the patches. I'm going to take a look at some new patches and some sequences. I'm going to play a few of those, and then we're going to go in and we're going to build a sequence and edit it and put some animation and stuff like that, so you can see kind of the workings of the sequencer just as a brief overview. Although I would suggest, if this is something you want to dive into, have the manual on hand, because it will be the answer to most of your questions when you're scratching your head with this. It's super, super simple to use, but you do need to spend the time to figure out how it works to get the most out of it, as with anything. So to jump in, I'm going to go and pick some of the new patches. I'm actually going to go, let's go up 100. So I just press shift there as I'm scrolling through patches, and that will then let me jump in hundreds. So nice. So we have a nice arp there. I'm going to play. There's nothing happening right now. If you remember before, we have this, which is just octaves, and we're playing a sequence on top. The arpeggiator is driving the sequencer. This is really interesting. So just whilst I play through some of these patches, I'm going to describe what's going on. We've got the arpeggiator cycling through some octaves. So I hold a single note and I get these octaves. When I hit play on the sequencer, nothing happens because we are in a different trigger mode. and actually the sequence is waiting to be triggered by any incoming notes. So as I trigger these notes here, the sequencer is triggered on every step that I trigger a note, but it's also playing notes itself. So this is So we're just going to jump over to the sequencer page. So you can see this sequencer layout that we have here. We have a piano roll now in the application. So we were playing this on gate through. This is what I was explaining before, that we have the sequence waiting for incoming MIDI, and then it's going to pass also the incoming MIDI through, as well as the sequence that it's playing. We also have a gate mode where you can just use incoming MIDI. It doesn't matter what the MIDI is at all if it's in key, because it won't be passed through. And then we have a gate transpose, which is where incoming MIDI, depending on what note it is, transposes the sequence. It'll be much more obvious when I get round to showing you on each of the patches that we're going to look at in a minute, but that's a basic overview of the playback modes. So we basically have a polyphonic step sequencer here, and we can input 8 notes to every single step. We can also input 4 lanes of animation. So we have this parameter lock style automation that you can dial in. And this can be really, really useful with sequences, but you don't just have to use it with sequences and notes and things. You could actually also use it just on its own to do some really, really interesting things. So if I look, for example, let's go for this guy here. This is just playing from an initialized patch. There's nothing going on, but I play the sequencer, and this is now just triggering through the automation. So this is just stepping through that locked automation that's in there. So we can do cool stuff like this, but we can also go a bit further, and we can use the automation to actually mess with the synth engine a little bit more. This is a really cool one. So this is a really cool one. We have this 8-step sequence going on here, and we have a look over here at the animations, and we can see that we've got anim 1 on tune 1. We have all of this data here. So this is actually acting like a step sequencer, and we can use these to change the pitch of the eventual animation. So if I go to anim 2, we've got control over the second oscillator. Mix it in. You notice now I have this top note. Super cool. Okay, let's look at another one quickly while we still have time. Super nice. So you can see in the application where we have all of those notes there, and you can see where I come to look at all of the animations, and I can choose any of the different available functions here to animate. You can see already some really cool stuff that we can do with this. So we're just going to look at another patch now before we dive into build our end sequence, which will keep it simple, but we'll just have an overview of how you actually jump in, how you swap over to step sequencer mode, and how you input notes and all that sort of stuff. So we'll just give a really quick rundown there before we move on to MPE. So this patch I'm going to show you before we do that. this could actually do with some longer envelopes, couldn't it? Let's go and put it onto snappy long for this one, because this one's nice and percussive. So there, boom, snappy long for both of those. Let's give it a bit of release. Nice. So this is using the gate transpose mode that I explained earlier. So it's deciding what to do with the sequence based on what notes I'm playing. So it decides where to transpose the sequence to based on what notes I'm playing, and it will only progress the steps if I play another note. So this is a basic overview of the kind of more exotic playback modes that we've got in here. Obviously we have normal clocked playback mode, so you can use it, excuse me, as you traditionally would expect with a step sequencer. And we also have some overdub modes that you can use. So this is when you leave the sequencer in and it's running what the overdub kind of behavior is going to be, whether it's going to be completely replacing stuff, whether it's overwriting and this sort of thing. So you've got access to all of that stuff there. And now we're going to look at making our own sequence. So I'm going to go patch seek, and we're going to go and load just an empty sequence here. And this is playing already, which is fine. I'm going to stop it from playing there. If I hit record straight away, you see I get straight to this menu. I just hit it twice and I can stop it there. I'm already now in the pages that I want. And I just choose my, I think it's the third option here. So we've got play, record, and then modes. And this is real time. Now the sequencer is a real time sequencer, a 512 note real time sequencer. Within this 512 note real time sequencer, we have built the step sequencer. So they're both the same thing. This is just a separate mode. And you can see when I do this quite quickly on screen as well, this will flip into the step edit mode. So that's how we jump into step edit mode. And we can just scroll through the sequencer menu here to set things like the step length, the number of steps. So it defaults to no if you haven't recorded anything in, there's none there, but it will update as you record things in, up to 64 steps. And then step mode here. So this is where we have access to those different trigger options, those gate modes that I was talking about earlier. And you can also use the sync input. So if you've got any sync enabled gear, you could use a sync trigger pulse to advance the steps as well, which is quite cool. So yeah, we've come into the sequencer, we've changed over to step sequence mode, and I'm going to put it on, we're just going to leave it on gate now. I just want to use the keyboard to progress the steps. So that's the setup there as much as I want it. Before I record this, I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to change the patch for starters because I want something polyphonic. So perhaps let's just make something very quickly. So. So I'm just picking some waves there. I've just chose some different wave banks. And I've just changed the WAV mod on wave 2. So I'm just using wave 1 for the output at the moment, but I'm modulating wave 1 with a ring modulator by wave 2. So all those nice wavetable decisions that I've made on wave 2 are being imparted on this nice clean sine wave over here. So we get a bit more of that bottom end. This is the thing with wavetables, and I think people maybe misunderstand wavetable synths a little bit, but this is a nice little algorithm. If you use it this way, kind of 2 to 1, you can get some really, really interesting results. I'm not saying that's how you should use wavetables. You should use them however you want. They're really, really adaptable, and you should play with all of the functions, and there's there's no wrong, in my opinion, with wavetable synthesizers. Just play with everything. But this is a really nice one because you get to impart a little bit of the character of the second wave whilst retaining the clarity of just your sine wave. So that's something I tend to do a lot. So here we have a nice patch. I'm going to go and put some nice envelopes on it. Let's go for the snappy ones. Soft. Oh, let's go with soft. Let's make a pad. Why not? Soft. So we'll give this guy. I'm going to put it onto a stack mode now because I just want those 4 notes. That's stack 4, let's go back to stack 2. Now every time I put a new 4-note chord in, those notes are being stolen, so I don't have that kind of release kind of question mark hanging from the previous notes. Cool, so if I come back to the sequence mode, if I just press play, we've got nothing going on. So if I just go to record here, you can see I have this step input mode. So I've just hit record and now I just have this step input mode. I'm not going to record anything just yet because what I'm going to do to make, well, I could just use the chord mode. You see, I could just go and it would capture those, but maybe I want some different chords. So actually let's go, just see what happens. Okay, so I've just put in those 4 chords, and whilst I was inputting the chords, I just changed a little bit of the wavetable data and some of the filter. So now when I cycle through, you should hear those automation points snapping between each step. Cool, so we now have this working. I'm just thinking about this because we're gonna put in some extra data into this. So I'm actually going to come off of this mode here, and we're going to go to poly for the moment. And I either have the option to come back in and record, or I can overdub notes. So yeah, I can either come into record and overdub the notes there, or replace them, or we can use obviously the step sequencer edit pages here to edit any of that information. So yeah, I'm going to show you how to jump in and edit notes. So now that we're not in a record mode, I can use patch and record, and this brings up this editor page for us here, and we can scroll through. You can see the different notes here, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are my steps on step 1, and we can also change to go to the different things here. So we can look at different the anims that are input there. We can look at the different steps here, and we can progress through all of the menu there. So if I go back to step 1, what I can do is I can go to select an empty note here, and I can input a new note. So if I know what I want, let's say we just want a low C sharp there. So let's go for this one here. We'll go over to the next step. So there's the animation that I've put in. So you can see I'm looking at this one here, and that is OSC Wave 2. And I can also look at the first one I put in, which is the filter cutoff, and the 2 empty ones here. So I have put in some OSC 1 wave stuff, but nothing on this first step. So now I'm going to go to the next step, and we are going to go and input another note here. So I'm going to go for a low F on this one. And we're going to come through to the next step again. And here I'm going to go low A. I'm actually just following whatever's in the first step here just to make my life a little bit easier. It could be that I am miles off actually, and I want to be on this A1 here. So I'm going to do that there. And we're going to go to step 4 quickly, B1. And I'm just going to come back and check those other 2 steps. 1. Yeah, see, that's ages away. So let's go C1. Boom. And for the next one here. And then up here to O and there. Cool. So now I have input these new bits of information in. I can come back and press play, or I can just so you can hear the bass notes that have been added there. Obviously you can do this stuff in app, and you can scroll through the different steps there, and you can just use the piano roll. You can also change the step length. This is a really cool one. So if you think about when we're using some of those gate modes and we have the arpeggiator and the sequencer running, we can think about the arpeggiator really as a monophonic 32-step sequencer, and the real-time step sequencer in here is an 8-note polyphonic step sequencer. So we could use these to do some really interesting things. We could have one with even steps and one with odd steps to create some kind of shuffling rhythms. We can do some really interesting stuff there if you kind of want to play with notes a little bit and have some non-repetitious patterns which you know are going to work together. Those two are going to be really interesting to set that stuff up. So there's a lot of nice stuff to explore between the two there. And I guess that pretty much wraps it up. As I said, we could go on for days and days about this stuff. I could show off so many different patterns and so many different crazy things that you could do with this, but I'll leave that up to you guys to explore on your own. And we're going to move on lastly, and we're going to talk about, actually before we look at MPE, we're going to talk about the improvements to the gain structure and to the sort of overall output levels. So what we've done to address this, and again this is one of the really early requests for us, so this is one I'm really happy to be showing off because it was one of those early and consistent requests that we got, that we had a look at the gain structure. So what we have done is we have introduced something called gain boost. This is an overall gain boost to the entire engine, so all of your patches, the overall average output level of Argon8 will be increased, and you've got a couple of options there. Then we have extended the range to the patch gain control. This is a pre-existing feature from Argon8 version 1.2 where you could adjust and balance the gain of each patch, so you could get even the quietest patches up to volume, and you could also use it to kind of, especially in conjunction with the gain boost, to saturate and give a little bit of character to your patches, just to give some kind of dynamic tickling as it goes into the dynamic processing on the way out of Argon8. You can get some really nice character effects with that, so that's quite interesting there. And lastly, we just improved the overall quality of the audio, the signal to noise ratio. So if you want to drive Argon8, you're not going to get any unwanted noise as you drive the input. So there's 3 really extended options, and I'm really happy to be able to say that we're doing that, because we're not just saying, okay, here's a blanket increase to the volume. We're actually giving some creative control back to you guys on how you want to use this stuff. And for any people who didn't have an issue before, they can leave it as it was, and for any people who want to get more creative and see or just boost the volume in general, yeah, you have the options to do that, but you have a few different options, which is quite cool, all from within the synthesizer. So that's one that we are happy to shout about with 2.0, because it's something that we know our users have been wanting for a long time. So we're now going to move on, and we're going to look at MPE. This is a really interesting one, because for us as a company, we've always been quite interested in MPE. I think the 002 was one of the first synthesizers to have MPE implemented, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But it's probably one of the most sort of drastic leaps forward in terms of technology with MIDI that we have seen. Obviously, I know that MIDI 2.0 is about to come out, or is in the process of coming out, I should say. But MPE really is kind of the vanguard of technology as far as what we can do with this stuff. This is kind of the cool stuff that's going on right now with with music tech and with keyboards and expressivity and all this stuff. This is what we're seeing a lot of at the moment. So we're really happy to be able to support MPE on Argon, and obviously it just opens this up to be a completely different beast now. So we have this incredible control of this crazy wavetable engine per note, and we can do all this crazy expression and do it polyphonically. It's very, very cool. So for those of you that don't know, you would need an MPE compatible controller. MPE is a way of offering polyphonic expression, and what that means is I can press a single note and have some sort of expression happening to that note which isn't affecting any of the other notes. So I could have that and have some expression or move it, and it's not going to pitch any of the other notes, and it's not going to add any of the, let's say, cut off that you're opening to any other notes. It's independent. It's they all have their own lane, so to say, which is very, very cool. It means we can get some super, super expressive stuff out of this, and it gets quite hauntingly beautiful when you combine the MPE functionality with Argon Engine, obviously, because we are kind of ideal for this ambient textures and things like this. You can do a huge amount of stuff with wavetables, but especially with everything that we've got in here with the envelopes and with just the really, really beautifully curated wavetables. There's a really, really nice soundscape to explore with MPE now, and I found myself really, really surprised by it, not having been a huge fan of some other MPE kind of synths and sound packs. There are some incredible ones out there, but also there's, it's quite hard sometimes to use MPE effectively, and I think we have a nice way of doing it in Argon 8. So I'm just going to pull up quickly the Rolly dashboard and show you the settings I use. And obviously you can go and grab the patches that came out with Firmware 2.0, and there's a whole bunch. There's 50 MPE patches that I've supplied there. So go and grab those and have a play with those. And you can see here, this is kind of my recommended settings for it. So I'll leave that up there for a second, so you guys can pause on this and kind of dial those settings in. Anybody that does have a C-board or an MPE compatible device, you could use that. And we're just going to go straight into look at some of the patches. So I'm going to go back 100 again using Shift, and yeah, here we go. Sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm just going to show you quickly how we set up MPE. Obviously we can do it from the screen here. We can go through to the settings and we can change the settings to enable MPE here, just there, MPE mode on, and this should set up kind of relatively a simple way for you there. You just enable it here and you go back into dashboard and you can adjust your settings there. And now we should have, yes. Let's keep going through and see what we've got here. Okay, I probably played a bit more than I needed to there, but that about wraps it up. So we managed to talk about the new envelope curves, we managed to talk about all of the new delay modes, we had a look at the chord invert and all of the options that you've got there. We spoke about the polyphonic step sequencer, we spoke about audio, so improvements to the overall output level, the gain boost introduction, and the improvements to patch gain. And we have just showed MPE. So that just about wraps it up for firmware 2.0. Obviously, we'll jump back and answer any of your questions now. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it.